The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such unity. 12 different species, each proud and ancient, stood together for the first time in recorded history. Their reason was simple: humanity had to be stopped. Ambassador Zethkar stepped forward on his 6 legs. His blue skin glowed with the ceremonial markings of his people. Behind him, the other council members waited in silence. Some had feathers, some had scales, and others had skin like metal. But today they all shared the same goal. "The vote is complete," Zethkar announced. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. "All 12 member species agree. Humanity must accept our terms or face the consequences." In the center of the hall, 5 humans sat at a small table. They looked tiny compared to the alien beings around them. Ambassador Sarah Chen, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, listened without moving. Her team did the same. The charges against humanity were long. The council accused them of taking resources without permission. They had built colonies on protected worlds. They treated all alien species as equals, which many found insulting. Worst of all, they refused to follow the ancient rules that kept the galaxy peaceful. "For too long, your species has acted without respect," continued Zethkar. "You take what you want. You build where you please. You ignore our wisdom and our laws." The hall filled with sounds of agreement. Clicks, hisses, and chirps came from the gathered aliens. Some species had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had seen young races before. Usually these newcomers learned their place quickly. Humans were different. In just 100 years they had spread across dozens of star systems. They built cities on dead worlds and made them bloom with life. They traded with everyone, fought with no one, and somehow grew stronger each year. This scared the council. "Your expansion ends now," Zethkar declared. "These are our terms. First, all human colonies beyond your home system must be abandoned. Second, your military fleet must be surrendered to council control. Third, humanity will accept quarantine in the Sol system until you learn proper behavior." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You have 72 standard hours to comply. If you refuse, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council will enforce these terms by force." The threat was real. The Council controlled thousands of warships. They had weapons that could destroy entire planets. They had fought wars across the galaxy and always won. Against their combined might, humanity's small fleet seemed like toys. Ambassador Chen finally stood up. She was not tall, even for a human. Her simple gray uniform looked plain next to the elaborate clothing of the alien diplomats. When she spoke, her voice was calm and quiet. "We understand," she said. "Good day, that was all. No arguments, no protests, no desperate attempts to negotiate." She picked up her datapad, nodded to her team, and walked toward the exit. The other humans followed her in silence. The council members looked at each other in confusion. They had expected anger, tears, or at least some attempt to fight the decision. Instead, the humans simply accepted defeat and left. "Well," said Ambassador Velthaean of the Crystal Dominion, "that was easier than expected." "Too easy," whispered Ambassador Korath of the Void Hunters. His red eyes glowed with suspicion. "Humans do not surrender so quickly," but Zethkar waved away their concerns. "Fear makes all species reasonable. They know they cannot win. Finally, they understand their place in the galaxy." The council began planning how to divide human territory among themselves. The mining worlds would go to the hegemony. The agricultural systems would feed the collective's hungry billions. The strategic positions would serve the Dominion's military needs. Within hours of the ultimatum, something strange began happening across human space. Every human ship, station, and colony started moving at once. But they were not preparing for war. Instead, they were packing up and leaving. The speed was impossible to believe. Colonies that had taken decades to build were being evacuated in days. Massive transport ships appeared from nowhere, as if humanity had been planning this moment for years. They moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a giant machine. Council monitors watched in amazement as entire cities were dismantled and loaded onto transport vessels. Mining equipment disappeared from asteroid belts. Space stations were broken down and packed away. Even the smallest outposts were being abandoned. "How are they moving so fast?" asked General Thexamar of the War Council. His insect-like head turned toward the tactical displays. "This level of organization should be impossible." "Perhaps they are more afraid than we thought," suggested Admiral Zephyrina. Her tentacles waved dismissively. "Fear can make any species move quickly, but the evacuation did not look fearful. It looked planned. Every movement was precise and efficient. The humans worked like they had practiced this evacuation many times before. Ships arrived exactly when needed. Cargo was loaded in perfect order. Nothing was wasted or left behind. More disturbing was the silence. Human communications networks, which had always buzzed with activity, went completely quiet. No distress calls, no goodbye messages, no attempts to contact friends in other species. It was as if humanity had simply decided to stop talking to the rest of the galaxy. By the end of the first day, entire star systems that had been full of human activity were empty. The Council's advanced scouts found abandoned cities, empty space stations, and orbital platforms drifting without crews. Everything was clean and undamaged, but completely deserted. "They are running like coward," declared Zethkar during an emergency session. "This proves we were right about their weakness." But some council members were not so sure. Ambassador Sylvaneth of the Ancient Ones had lived for thousands of years. She had seen many species rise and fall. Her silver eyes held worry. "In all my years," she said slowly, "I have never seen a species evacuate so completely, so quickly. This suggests preparation, planning, as if they knew this day would come." "Nonsense," snapped Zethkar. "They are simply efficient cowards." On the second day, the evacuation continued. But now the humans were doing something even stranger. They were taking everything with them. Not just people and personal belongings, but entire factories, power plants, and even pieces of the infrastructure they had built. Massive ships, larger than anything in the Council's databases, appeared at the edge of human territory. These vessels moved with impossible grace, collecting not just people but whole sections of space stations and orbital facilities. It was like watching someone pack up their house, but on the scale of entire star systems. The most unsettling part was that the humans were destroying what they could not take. Jump gates that connected human space to the galactic network were carefully dismantled. Communication arrays were shut down and removed. It was as if humanity was deliberately cutting all ties with the rest of the galaxy. "Where are they going?" asked Ambassador Korath. His warriors had been tracking the human ships, but their destination made no sense. "They are heading toward the galactic rim. There is nothing out there but empty space and dead stars." "Let them go," said Zethkar. "The farther they travel, the less trouble they can cause." But deep in his heart, even Zethkar was beginning to feel uneasy. The human evacuation was too smooth, too well organized. It did not look like the desperate flight of a defeated people. It looked like something else entirely, something planned, something purposeful, something that made him wonder if the Council had made a terrible mistake. Captain Velterran had served in the Council fleet for 30 years. He had seen battles across the galaxy and witnessed the fall of 3 different civilizations. But he had never seen anything like what was happening in human space. His ship, the Eternal Watcher, hung in space near what used to be the human colony of New Geneva. 2 days ago, this system had been home to 12 million humans. Now it was completely empty. "Report," he ordered his sensor officer. "The evacuation is complete, Captain," came the reply. "No life signs detected anywhere in the system. All human ships have departed. And the infrastructure? Gone, sir. They took everything." Velterran looked at the main screen. Where massive orbital shipyards had once floated, only empty space remained. The humans had not just abandoned their facilities, they had taken them apart piece by piece and carried them away. "How is this possible?" whispered his communications officer. "The shipyards alone were the size of small moons. How do you move something like that?" Velterran had no answer. According to his records, those shipyards had taken the humans 15 years to build. They had dismantled and removed them in less than 2 days. "Captain," called his tactical officer, "I'm detecting something strange." "What is it?" "Energy signatures, sir. Very faint, but they're everywhere. It's like the humans left some kind of residue behind." Velterran ordered a full scan. The results made his scales turn cold. Every human facility, every station, every piece of infrastructure showed traces of exotic energy. Energy signatures that did not match any known technology in the Council's databases. "Sir," said his science officer, her voice shaking, "these readings suggest the humans were using some kind of advanced matter manipulation technology. They could literally dissolve their structures and reform them elsewhere." "That's impossible," Velterran said automatically, but even as he spoke, he knew it was the only explanation that made sense. Similar reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Every human colony, every outpost, every trace of human presence was being erased with impossible speed and efficiency. The humans were not just leaving, they were taking their entire civilization with them. Admiral Corvinthal of the HFY War fleet received the most disturbing report of all. His scouts had tracked the human evacuation ships to the edge of the galaxy, where long-range sensors detected something that should not exist. "Show me the data," he commanded. The holographic display filled with images from the galactic rim. In the cold darkness between galaxies where nothing should live or move, massive structures were taking shape. The human ships were not fleeing randomly. They were heading to a specific location where something was being built. "How long have those structures been there?" Corvinthal asked. "Unknown, sir," replied his intelligence officer. "Our sensors have never reached that far before. But based on the size and complexity, they must have been under construction for decades." The implications hit him like a physical blow. While the Council had been watching human expansion across the galaxy, humanity had been building something in the darkness beyond all observation. Something huge. Estimate the size of those structures. "Difficult to determine at this range, sir, but preliminary scans suggest they dwarf anything we've ever built. Some appear to be larger than entire star systems." Back on the Council homeworld, emergency sessions were being held every few hours. The reports from the field were creating panic among the leadership. Humanity's evacuation was not the desperate flight of refugees. It was a carefully planned operation that had been prepared for years, possibly decades. Ambassador Zethkar tried to maintain order, but his own confidence was shaking. The humans had moved billions of people and countless tons of equipment in just 2 days. The level of organization required was staggering. "Perhaps," suggested Ambassador Sylvaneth, "we should reconsider our actions. Send a message to the humans. Offer to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Zethkar's voice rose. "They are fleeing."
"We have won."
"Have we?" asked Ambassador Korath quietly. "Look at the reports. They are not running in panic. They are relocating according to a plan we never suspected existed." The truth was becoming clear to anyone willing to see it. Humanity had not been caught off guard by the Council's ultimatum. They had been expecting it. More than that, they had been preparing for it. Dr. Yelthan, the Council's chief xenobiologist, made a discovery that chilled everyone who heard it. While studying abandoned human colonies, her team found evidence that humanity had been conducting research far beyond what anyone had realized. "The genetic samples we've collected show modifications," she reported. "Extensive modifications. The humans who lived in these colonies were not the same humans who first left Earth. They had been enhanced." "Enhanced how?" demanded Zethkar. "Increased lifespan, improved intelligence, resistance to radiation and disease, and something else, something I've never seen before. Their brain patterns show signs of quantum entanglement. They were connected to each other in ways that should be impossible." The room fell silent. Quantum entanglement between biological minds was theoretical at best. If humanity had achieved it, they were far more advanced than anyone had imagined. "There's more," Dr. Yelthan continued. "The abandoned facilities show signs of technologies we don't understand. They were manipulating space-time itself, folding dimensions, creating pocket realities." "You're saying they could build their own universes?" asked Ambassador Velthayan. "I'm saying they were already doing it." The final piece of the puzzle came from Captain Zexril of the Deep Space Reconnaissance Fleet. His ship had been following the energy trails left by the human evacuation. The trail led to the galactic rim, where his sensors detected something that made his crew question their own sanity. "Admiral," he reported, "the humans are not just building structures out there. They're building space itself." "Explain." "The energy readings indicate they're creating artificial dimensions, pocket universes connected to our reality through quantum bridges. They're not just hiding beyond the galaxy. They're hiding in spaces that didn't exist before they created them." The Council members looked at each other in growing horror. They had thought they were dealing with an aggressive but primitive species. Instead, they had been facing beings who could literally create new realities. "How long?" asked Zethkar quietly. "How long have they been building this?" "Based on the quantum decay patterns," replied the captain, "at least 50 years. Possibly longer." The truth was devastating. For half a century, while the Council had been watching human expansion and growing concerned about their ambitions, Humanity had been preparing for exactly this moment. They had built hidden infrastructure, developed impossible technologies, and created escape routes that led to dimensions the Council never knew existed. They planned this, whispered Ambassador Sylvaneth. From the beginning, they planned for the day we would try to stop them, and we gave them the excuse they needed, added Ambassador Korath. The evacuation was nearly complete. Within hours, the last human ship would disappear beyond the galactic rim. Behind them, they would leave empty worlds and abandoned facilities. But they would take with them technologies that could reshape reality itself. In the council chambers, the celebration that had begun just days ago turned to ash. They had wanted to put humanity in its place. Instead, they had driven them to become something that might be beyond anyone's ability to control. The last transmission from human space came as the final transport ship prepared to jump to hyperspace. It was brief and broadcast on all frequencies. To the Galactic Council, thank you for giving us a reason to leave. You will not see us again until you are ready to see what we have become. Then silence, complete and total silence. Humanity had departed, taking their secrets with them, and in that silence the Council began to understand that they might have made the greatest mistake in galactic history. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim. The Council's victory celebrations had been magnificent. Parades filled the capital worlds. Monuments were built to commemorate the day the galaxy was finally safe from human ambition, but the victory tasted wrong. Governor Thexmore stood on the observation deck of what used to be the human colony ship Endeavor. The massive vessel now served as the administrative center for the hegemony's new mining operations in the former human system of Kepler 442. Everything looked perfect. The ship was undamaged, the facilities were intact, and the orbital platforms remained exactly where the humans had left them. Yet nothing worked. Status report, he demanded from his engineering chief. The same as yesterday, sir, replied Engineer Velketh. All systems appear functional, but none respond to our commands. We can't access the computers, we can't start the reactors, and we can't operate any of the manufacturing equipment. Thexmore's mandibles clicked in frustration. This was the 14th human facility his teams had tried to activate. All showed the same problem. The technology was there, but it might as well have been carved from stone for all the good it did them. What about the research teams? Dr. Yelsan believes the humans used some kind of quantum lock system. Every piece of equipment is keyed to human genetic signatures, quantum brain patterns, and possibly other factors we haven't identified yet. The governor stared out at the mining platforms floating in space around them. They represented wealth beyond imagination, rare metals, exotic materials, and energy sources that could power entire worlds. All of it was there waiting to be used. None of it was accessible. Keep trying, he ordered, though he knew it was pointless. Similar scenes were playing out across former human territory. The collective had claimed the agricultural worlds, but found the automated farms would not respond to their commands. The Dominion had seized the strategic hyperspace junctions, but discovered the jump gates remained permanently locked in standby mode. Most frustrating of all were the research stations. The humans had been developing technologies that the Council's scientists could barely understand, let alone replicate. Quantum computers sat silent in laboratories. Fusion reactors that could power entire cities remained cold and dark. Terraforming equipment that could transform dead rocks into garden worlds stood motionless. Dr. Velthan of the Empirical Union had spent 3 months studying a single human research facility on Proxima Station. Her team of expert scientists worked around the clock trying to unlock its secrets. Their progress could be measured in failures. It's not just that the equipment won't work, she explained to her frustrated colleagues. It's as if the humans took the very knowledge of how their technology functions with them when they left. That's impossible, protested Dr. Corthan. Knowledge can't just disappear, can't it? Dr. Velthan pulled up a holographic display showing the internal structure of a human quantum processor. Look at this device. We can see every component, measure every connection, analyze every material, but when we try to build a copy, it remains completely inert. There must be something we're missing. Some hidden component or activation sequence. That's what we thought at first. But after months of study, I believe something else is happening. The humans didn't just build technology, they integrated it with their own consciousness. These devices don't just respond to commands. They respond to thoughts, emotions, and patterns of brain activity that only humans possess. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Velthane was right, human technology was not just advanced, it was alive in a way that no other species had achieved. Machines and minds working together as a single entity. Meanwhile, at the edge of known space, something troubling was happening. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting unusual energy signatures coming from the direction where humanity had vanished. The readings were faint but consistent, growing slightly stronger each day. Captain Morveth of the patrol ship Silent Hunter was the first to see them with his own eyes. His ship had been conducting a routine sweep of the outer systems when his sensors detected something that shouldn't exist. "Commander," called his sensor operator, "I'm reading massive energy discharges from the galactic rim. Distance approximately 50,000 light-years. That's impossible. Nothing exists at that distance." "Yes, sir. But the readings are definite. Something very large is generating enormous amounts of power out there." Captain Morveth ordered his ship to the maximum range of their sensors. What they found defied belief. In the cold darkness between galaxies, structures were taking shape that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy, and they were growing. "Estimate size and composition," he ordered. "Sir, the structures appear to be constructed from materials we don't recognize. Some sections are larger than gas giants, and they're moving, changing shape, as if they're alive." The captain's blood ran cold. "Are they ships?" "Unknown, sir." "They don't match any known starship design. They look more like habitats, or possibly something else entirely." Similar reports began flooding in from across the galactic perimeter. Whatever humanity was building in their exile, it was vast beyond comprehension, and it was getting bigger. In the council chambers, emergency meetings were called daily. The initial euphoria of victory had given way to growing unease. Reports from the field painted a picture that none of them wanted to accept. "The humans left us nothing of value," reported Admiral Corvinthul. "Every facility we've claimed is functionally useless. It's as if they gave us the shells of their civilization while taking everything that made it work." "Perhaps that was their intention," suggested Ambassador Sylvaneth. "They knew we would claim their territory. They made sure we would gain nothing from it." "But why?" demanded Zethkar. "What possible purpose could that serve?" "To buy time," said Ambassador Korath quietly, "and to make sure we couldn't use their own technology against them." The most disturbing reports came from the intelligence services. Agent Yextral of the Shadow Corps had been monitoring communication networks for any sign of human activity. What she found was worse than silence. "They're not trying to hide," she reported. "They're not sending any signals into our space at all. It's as if they've completely forgotten we exist." "That's good, isn't it?" asked Zethkar hopefully. "No, sir. It's terrifying. Species that are planning revenge stay in contact. They watch, they gather intelligence, they prepare. Species that completely ignore their enemies are either dead or so far beyond you that you no longer matter to them." The room fell silent. The thought that humanity might simply not care about the Council anymore was somehow more frightening than any threat of retaliation. As the months passed, the energy signatures from the galactic rim grew stronger. Long-range telescopes began detecting massive objects moving through the void. Ships, stations, or possibly something else entirely. They were too distant to study in detail, but their size was obvious. Some were larger than moons. Others appeared to be the size of small planets. All of them radiated energy patterns that the Council's best scientists couldn't explain. "What are they building out there?" wondered Governor Thexmore as he stood in another empty human facility. The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. And when it did, the Council would learn that their victory had been the worst defeat in galactic history. But for now, they celebrated their hollow triumph and tried not to think about the growing lights in the darkness beyond the stars. They told themselves that humanity was gone for good, that the galaxy was finally safe. They were wrong. Deep in the void, something was stirring. Something that had once been human, but was becoming something else entirely, something that remembered being driven from their homes, remembered being told they didn't belong, something that was preparing to return. 18 months after humanity's departure, the first ship vanished. The Stellar Pride was a hegemony patrol vessel conducting routine surveys near the galactic rim. Captain Velnor had been tracking energy signatures that his science officer claimed were impossible. One moment they were there, investigating strange readings in empty space. The next moment they were gone, no distress signal, no debris, no trace that they had ever existed. Search teams report negative contact, Admiral Thexacol announced to the Council. The Stellar Pride and her crew of 300 have simply disappeared. Space is dangerous, replied Zethkar dismissively. Ships are lost to accidents all the time, but Admiral Thexacal's expression remained grim. Sir, this is the 5th ship we've lost near the rim in the past month. All were investigating unusual energy readings. All vanished without trace. The disappearances were spreading panic through the outer patrol fleets. Crews who had once eagerly volunteered for rim duty now requested transfers to safer assignments. The few who did venture to the galactic edge returned with stories that no one wanted to believe. Commander Sarthek of the scout ship, Quick Strike, was one of the lucky ones. Her ship had encountered something near the edge and lived to tell about it. Her report sent shockwaves through Council intelligence. We detected a massive energy signature moving through hyperspace, she explained to the emergency session. Whatever it was bigger than a capital ship, bigger than a space station, bigger than anything in our databases. Could you identify it? Asked Admiral Corventhal. No, sir. When we tried to scan it, all our sensors overloaded. The electromagnetic pulse nearly destroyed our ship's systems. But we did see something before we had to retreat. What did you see? Commander Sarthek's voice dropped to a whisper. It looked like a ship, but it was wrong. The hull seemed to shift and change as we watched. And there were lights inside, not the lights of a normal vessel, but something organic. Something alive. Similar reports were flooding in from across the galactic perimeter, massive objects moving through space at impossible speeds. Energy signatures that broke their instruments. Strange lights in the darkness where nothing should exist. The intelligence services tried to make sense of the scattered reports. Agent Kexmore had spent weeks analyzing the data, looking for patterns that might explain what was happening. The objects are definitely artificial, she reported. But they don't follow any known principles of starship design. They seem to change shape, alter their energy signatures, and move in ways that violate our understanding of physics. Are they weapons? Asked Zethkar. Unknown, sir. They haven't attacked anyone directly, but several ships that got too close have simply vanished. No signs of weapon fire, no evidence of explosion. They're just gone. The breaking point came when the border station Deepwatch detected something that changed everything. Chief Operator Velton was monitoring long-range sensors when every instrument on the station suddenly activated at once. Sir, he called to Station Commander Thexron. I'm detecting a massive hyperspace disturbance. Something big is coming through. How big? Sir, the readings don't make sense. According to these instruments, the object emerging from hyperspace is approximately the size of Earth's moon. Commander Thexron stared at the display in disbelief. Objects that large didn't travel through hyperspace. The energy requirements would be astronomical. The gravitational effects alone would tear the ship apart. Confirm those readings, he ordered. Confirmed, sir. Object has fully emerged from hyperspace and it's just sitting there. Distance approximately 10 light hours from our position. Can we scan it? I'm trying, sir, but our sensors keep overloading. Whatever that thing is made of, it's interfering with our instruments. They tried for hours to get a clear reading on the mysterious object. Every attempt failed. Their most powerful telescopes showed only a vague shape that seemed to shift and blur whenever they focused on it. It was as if the object existed partially outside normal space. Then, after 6 hours of silence, the object sent a message. The transmission came through on all frequencies simultaneously. It was brief, transmitted in perfect galactic standard, and delivered in a voice that some of the older council members recognized. With growing dread, to the Galactic Council, said the voice of Ambassador Sarah Chen. You chose to judge humanity by your own limitations. You assumed our silence meant submission. You were wrong on both counts. What you forced us to become is your responsibility. Consider this your only warning. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. Within minutes, the massive object vanished back into hyperspace, leaving behind only radiation signatures that would take months to analyze. The Council emergency session lasted 18 hours. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Similar objects had appeared near dozens of systems, always at the edge of sensor range, always broadcasting the same message. Then they were gone, leaving behind only questions and growing fear. They're back, whispered Ambassador Sylvaneth, but they're not the same humans who left. Dr. Velthayan had spent the entire night analyzing the energy signatures left behind by the mysterious objects. Her findings were disturbing beyond words. The quantum resonance pattern suggests these ships, if that's what they are, exist partially outside our dimension, she reported. They're using technologies that manipulate space-time itself. And there's something else. What? The biosignatures I detected suggest the beings aboard these vessels are not entirely biological anymore. They show signs of quantum consciousness integration, digital and organic minds working as a single entity. You're saying they've merged with machines? Asked Zethkar. I'm saying they've transcended the distinction between biological and artificial intelligence. They've become something new. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had evolved beyond anything the Council could understand. They had become beings that could manipulate reality itself. More disturbing reports began arriving daily. Ships near the Galactic Rim reported seeing vast structures moving through the void. Some appeared to be cities floating in space. Others looked like living organisms the size of planets. All of them radiated energy patterns that defied explanation. They're not just building ships, reported Captain Morveth after his latest patrol. They're building entire civilizations out there. Mobile worlds, living space habitats, things that shouldn't be possible. The most frightening report came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station, FAIR. Operator Lexavon had been tracking energy emissions from the Galactic Rim when she detected something that made her question her own sanity. I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies, she reported. It's as if space itself is being folded, twisted, reshaped. That's impossible, replied her supervisor. Yes, sir. But the readings are clear. Whatever humanity is doing out there, they're not just building in space. They're building space itself. In the council chambers, panic was setting in. The scattered reports painted a picture of humanity transformed into something beyond their worst nightmares. Beings who could manipulate reality, who existed partially outside normal space-time, who commanded technologies that treated physics as mere suggestions. What do we do? Asked Ambassador Velthan. For the first time since humanity's departure, Zethkar had no answer. The species they had driven into exile had become something that might be beyond any force in the galaxy. They had wanted to put humanity in its place. Instead, they had given them the motivation and isolation needed to transcend their place entirely. We wait, said Ambassador Korath quietly, and we hope that when they decide to return, they remember that we were once their neighbors. And if they don't? Asked Zethkar. The silence that followed was answer enough. In the darkness beyond the galaxy, humanity was stirring. They had taken the Council's ultimatum as a gift, freedom from the constraints of galactic politics, freedom to become whatever they chose to be. And what they had chosen was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans were coming home, but they were no longer the species that had left. 2 years after humanity's departure, reality began to change. It started small. Navigation computers throughout the galaxy began reporting impossible readings. Star charts that had been accurate for millions of years suddenly showed new objects in empty space. Jump calculations that should have been routine started failing for no apparent reason. Captain Valzar of the merchant vessel Trade Wind was the first to see it happen. His ship was making a standard cargo run between the hegemony worlds when every instrument on his bridge went completely mad. Navigation report, he called out as alarms sounded throughout the ship. Sir, I'm reading multiple gravity wells where none should exist, his navigator replied, her voice shaking. It's as if new stars have appeared in our flight path. That's impossible. Nothing changes that quickly in space. Yes, sir. But the readings are definite. We're detecting at least 12 massive objects that weren't there yesterday. Captain Velsar ordered an emergency drop from hyperspace. What he saw when they emerged into normal space would haunt him for the rest of his life. Floating in the void where nothing had existed before were structures that defied every law of physics he knew. They looked like crystals, but crystals the size of moons. They pulsed with internal light that shifted through colors that had no names. Around them, space itself seemed to ripple and bend as if reality was becoming fluid. Sir, whispered his science officer, I'm detecting massive quantum distortions. These objects they're changing the fabric of space-time itself. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The mysterious structures were appearing everywhere, always in empty space, always without warning. They came in many shapes. Some looked like vast flowers made of light. Others resembled geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. All of them radiated energy that made conventional sensors useless. The council convened in permanent emergency session. The reports from their scattered fleets painted a picture that none of them wanted to accept. Reality itself was being rewritten, and there was only one possible explanation. "Humanity has returned," announced Admiral Corventhal. "But they're not using ships anymore. They're using something else." Dr. Velthin had spent weeks analyzing the quantum signatures emanating from the mysterious structures. Her findings challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of existence itself. "These aren't ships or stations," she explained to the terrified council. "They're pocket dimensions. Self-contained universes that humanity has somehow anchored to our reality. And they're growing." "What do you mean, growing?" demanded Zethkar. "Each structure is expanding, creating more space around itself, not just building into existing space, but actually creating new space, new dimensions of reality that conform to human will rather than natural law." The implications were beyond comprehension. Humanity had not just developed advanced technology. They had learned to create reality itself. They were rewriting the fundamental rules that governed existence. The first direct contact came without warning. Ambassador Sylvaneth was studying reports in her private chamber when the air in front of her simply opened like a door. Through the impossible opening stepped a figure that might once have been human. She was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to be made of living starlight. Her eyes held depths that suggested she had seen the birth and death of universes. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that touched not just the ears but the soul itself. "Ambassador Sylvaneth," she said calmly, "we need to talk." Sylvaneth's security systems didn't even register the intrusion. No alarm sounded, no guards came running. It was as if the visitor existed in a space between spaces, visible but not quite real. "You're human," Sylvaneth managed to say. "I was human," the figure replied. "Now I am something more. My name was Dr. Elena Vasquez. I was a quantum physicist on Earth before we left. Now I am what my people call a reality architect. What do you want? To show you what you created when you forced us to leave." The walls of the chamber dissolved, replaced by a view that should have been impossible. They stood in space, but space that had been transformed into something beautiful and terrible. Stars hung like jewels in patterns that formed vast geometric designs. Planets floated in impossible configurations, their surfaces glowing with cities that looked like living art. "This is what we built in exile," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Not just ships or stations, but entire universes where the laws of physics serve our needs rather than limiting them. We learned to think on scales you cannot imagine." Sylvaneth stared at the transformed cosmos around them. "How?" "Necessity. You gave us two choices. Submit to your authority or find another way to exist. We chose a third option. We chose to transcend the limitations that make authority necessary." The structures appearing throughout the galaxy. "Gates," Dr. Vasquez said simply. "We're returning to reclaim what was once ours. But we're not the same species that left. We've become something that your political structures cannot contain or control." The vision ended, and Sylvaneth found herself back in her chamber. But the message was clear. Humanity was returning, not as refugees or conquerors, but as beings who had moved beyond the very concepts that defined galactic civilization. Within days, the truth became undeniable. The mysterious structures were indeed gates, and through them came a humanity transformed beyond recognition. They didn't arrive in ships, they simply appeared, stepping through holes in reality as easily as walking through doors. The humans who returned were still recognizably human in basic form, but they had been changed in fundamental ways. Some had integrated technology directly into their bodies. Others seemed to exist partially as energy rather than matter. All of them radiated power that made the strongest council members seem like children. They came to the worlds they had once called home and began the work of reclamation. But they weren't taking back territory. They were taking back reality itself. Planets that had been stripped and exploited began to bloom with impossible beauty. Dead systems suddenly sparked with new life that followed no known biological rules. The process was terrifying in its gentleness. The humans didn't fight or threaten. They simply began remaking everything according to their vision of what it should be, and no force in the galaxy could stop them. Ambassador Chen herself appeared before the full council assembly, stepping through the air as if it were an open doorway. She looked exactly as she had 2 years before, but her presence filled the chamber with power that made the very atoms vibrate in harmony. "Members of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying impossible authority, "we have returned to complete our work." "What work?" Sethkar managed to ask. "The work you interrupted when you tried to confine us to a single star system. We were meant to spread across the galaxy, to grow and explore and become more than we were. You tried to stop that growth. Instead, you gave us the freedom to grow beyond all limits. We made a mistake," admitted Ambassador Sylvaneth. "Can we negotiate? Can we find some way to coexist?" Ambassador Chen's expression was not unkind, but it held the patience of someone speaking to a child. "You assume we need your permission to exist? You assume your governments have authority over beings who can create universes. These assumptions are no longer valid. What happens to us?" asked Zethkar quietly. "That depends on you. We bear no malice toward any species, but we will not be confined again. The galaxy is changing, becoming something larger and more wonderful than it was. You can adapt to that change or you can be left behind by it." The transformation had already begun. Across the galaxy, reality was being gently but irresistibly reshaped. The humans didn't destroy or conquer. They simply made everything better, more beautiful, more alive. But their definition of better operated on scales that traditional civilizations couldn't comprehend. Some species adapted, learning to live in a universe where the rules of physics were more like suggestions and consciousness, could reshape matter with thought alone. Others retreated to isolated systems, clinging to the old ways and the old limitations. The council itself dissolved not through conquest, but through irrelevance. When reality itself could be reshaped by will alone, governments became as obsolete as stone tools in a world of nanotechnology. In the end, the humans had kept their promise. They had returned when the galaxy was ready to see what they had become. And what they had become was beyond any possibility of control or containment. They had transcended not just the limitations of biology and technology, but the limitations of existence itself. They had become gardeners of reality, nurturing universes the way their ancestors had once nurtured gardens on Earth. The Council's victory had lasted exactly as long as it took humanity to outgrow the need for victory at all. In driving them away, the galaxy had created something beautiful and terrible, a species that had learned to rewrite the very foundations of what was possible. And in the end, that was perhaps the greatest victory of all. The universe was no longer bound by the small thinking of those who sought to control it. It had been set free to become something magnificent, guided by beings who had learned that true power came not from domination, but from the courage to become more than anyone had ever imagined possible.